Back in 2014, I purchased my first condo in the city of Toronto. And when I look back at this price, it was $292,900. It's actually funny because I was a professional hockey player at the time, and Felix Potvin growing up was my favorite player. He wore 29, I wore 29 while playing. And when I purchased Unit 229, and I won't say the building, also purchased for 292900, it felt like all the cards kind of fell into play when purchasing that property. What I regret the most is I actually sold that condo 2 years later. Life circumstances brought me to a totally different city in my off seasons, and I decided it was time to sell. There was also influences at the time, and I remember sitting down with a friend of mine saying, I'm thinking of selling because I'm reading all these articles about how the market's going to crash in the city of Toronto. We just had a new election here in Canada, and all the signs kind of were pointing to maybe a correction in the Toronto real estate market, and every single article I read was kind of giving those vibes as well. I remember my time saying this Toronto, the market is very resilient and condos should perform very well. I end up selling that condo in 2016. 2 years later, I actually sold for just under $370,000, which on the grand scheme of things is about a 25% profit in 2 years. So not too bad at all. However, once you factor in land transfer tax and the cost to sell, there wasn't really much upside there. Fast forward 10 years and that property now would be worth somewhere in and around $700,000. And that number one biggest threat in real estate is I did not hold on to that property. And instead, I sold it. And the intent at the time was to go and purchase a duplex in the city I was moving to, which was Ottawa, which I actually wasn't even able to find in my short off-season window. I ended up purchasing another condo from the developer. I actually had that condo quite a bit of time. However, it definitely did not perform the same way a condo here in the city of Toronto was. I thought for this video, it'd also be interesting to look at articles that I was looking at back in 2014, 20, and 2016. And for this video, we're just going to go through some of the titles and the dates. First one up, home prices 10% overvalued TD estimates. This was February 3rd, 2014. In fact, a couple months prior to me actually that condo. Next up in 2014, housing crash not in the cards, local and national experts say. Of course, a new report from a national think tank says the notion of Canada being in a housing bubble that could pop at any time is unlikely. And a local real estate expert says even if it were to take place, Waterloo region wouldn't be affected. Of course, they were talking about Waterloo region. However, similar narrative that we still hear even today. So those were in 2015, but as we started going to 2015 and to the end of 2015, this is what we started to see. And this one says here, Canada's housing market faces a looming demographic bubble. This was posted by John Podis on November 10th, 2015. And looking at this article from Toronto Life, it says mortgages for all. This is also in November 2015. It says how over-leveraged homeowners are turning to private lenders and threatening economy. It's really interesting to see how a lot of these articles came out in number. And this one says reports warn housing crash would hit young homeowners the hardest. And if you take a look here, it says a new report warns of a housing market crash that could leave young Canadians vulnerable to crippling debt, and that Canadians are taking on such high levels of debt to finance their real estate dreams that a sudden market correction would leave many families in big trouble. And as we get into 2016, even my company, Royal LePage, said real estate market expect to slow in 2016. And last one up, McLean's. This one says Canada's housing bubble makes America's look tiny. This was on October 31st, 2016. I'd already sold my condo by this point, but does say that comparing Canada's infatuation with real estate against the peak of the US housing bubble yield disturbing insight. The reason for this video is because when looking at all these articles, it feels eerily similar to what we are seeing today. The factor in 2015 is there was an election in Canada, and that's when Justin Trudeau first became the prime minister. It's so interesting as we've seen these markets ebb and flow here. How I remember being a condo owner thinking this might be the time that I should sell. If I would have kept that condo today and basically held through and just lived in it the way it was intended to be lived in as a condo, of course, that property would have well more than doubled in those 10 years. And not only that, it would have been paid down significantly in that time. This still remains one of my biggest mistakes when it comes to investing property and in real estate is that I didn't hold on long enough to really see that property do some legwork for me. If I take a look back and it would have changed things, 100% I would have found a way to keep that property. And if I was moving to relocate, it might have been worth maybe potentially seeing some options on whether or not I could refinance or maybe purchase another property without having to sell the first one. Any options like that might have been a bit smarter at the time. It still remains my biggest regret in real estate. And while I do feel that is a time and place when it makes sense to sell a property, especially if you're a condo owner right now and you're looking to maybe to move to a freehold property, it could be a really good option for you in today's market, or if you want to downsize from your house into another property. One of the biggest takes personally is that I actually let go of the real estate that I owned in Toronto in a great location and ended up moving that capital to another city altogether. Now, of course, it's easy to lack and had a shoulda, woulda, coulda, but it is something that always comes to my mind when I think about all these markets, how they're ebbing and flowing. If someone can maintain payments and continue to enjoy where they live, it might make sense for them to keep their condo the long term and see how things play out in a matter of years and not just being short-sighted on what we're seeing in today's market currently. There are scenarios where I would suggest selling a condo if you're looking to make another play, especially if you're staying in the city of Toronto when it comes to making that next real estate play. I did sell another condo along that time in order to prepare to purchase a freehold property. And by the way, if you are a condo owner looking to make a move into a freehold property in the city of Toronto, click on that first link down below or scan the QR code and book in either a discussion call or a New Year's strategy session at any time that works for you. That's my story on why I regret selling that condo. And in fact, the market did come down a bit in 2017, 2018. We did get a lot of new rules when it came to properties in that time. However, had I held it even longer, the property definitely did some legwork well beyond 2017, 2018, and even till today. I'm Mike Ouzas. Thanks for watching.